Hello, Reformed Church of Port Ewan. We have an exciting announcement this morning. Your sister and I are so excited to announce that we will be reopening for worship on June 21st. We will be gathering in person once again to worship together on June 21st. We have been hard at work the last 3 weeks putting together procedures and guidelines to be prepared for when we do that. We initially thought we'd have a few more weeks, initially under churches and other institutions like ours wouldn't be able to gather again until phase 4, which the earliest point for our region of that would have been in July. But late last week, they announced that if you're under 25% capacity in the building, that you could gather in person again. And we meet that threshold. Our congregation meets that threshold. And so we are happy to announce we've finalized our procedures and we will be able to gather again on June 21st. We've been balancing as your consistory. On one hand, we don't want to be reckless. We don't want to unnecessarily put our own life or the life of someone else in danger or in harm's way. So on one hand, we don't want to be reckless. On the other end, it's not so much safety. Safety, while important, is not the end goal. We each take risks every day. So the idea isn't that to be human doesn't mean that we're safe and comfortable. It means that we balance risks all the time. We're weighing risks. We're prudently wondering what risks to take, what risks not to take. And so it's more a balancing of risks. So on one hand, we're balancing risks. To gather in person is a risk, but it's a necessary risk, I think. And we're trying to balance that risk with also not putting anyone unnecessarily, our own lives, or especially the life of someone else, in harm's way when we gather together. We have put together a document that names our core values. It names our guidelines and procedures, requirements, what will be expected of you when you come to worship, what you can expect when you get to worship, has frequently asked questions for further explanation with links in the document that you can go and do your own reading. We are distributing that to you via email, or we have put it in the mail for those of you who do not use email. We ask that you read that document all the way through. It's 5 pages long, a lot of bullet points. So it might look daunting, but we ask that you read it completely all the way through. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. I just want to run through a few things quickly this morning in our time together. And the first is this. Our core values are there's 3 of them, and the first is sacrificial love for the sake of our neighbors. Philippians 2 tells us, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others as more significant of yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but to the interests of others. Look not only to your own interests, but to the interests of others. That's the way of Jesus Christ, who went to the cross in sacrificial love. He didn't cling to his own rights. He didn't cling to his own life. He didn't cling to his own safety. Rather, he gave himself up for the sake of others. There are going to be things that in our requirements and procedures for worship that you might not agree with, but we're asking you to do it not for yourself, but for the sake of another. That's the core impulse behind asking you to wear a mask. Masks are proven to really reduce the spread of COVID. It's now thought that might be one of the single greatest contributors to preventing the spread of COVID-19. And masks don't necessarily protect you, but they do protect others from you. So they don't protect you from others, but they protect others from you. And that's really a Christian virtue, that we're not out for our own protection, but we're out to protect others. We do things in sacrificial love for the sake of our neighbor. And so we ask you to commit to that core biblical value together. The second one is grace and unity. St. Paul writes in Ephesians that I, therefore, as a prisoner of the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling for which you have been called, with all humility, gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. We ask that you bear with us in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There are going to be things that we disagree about, but we ask that we bear with one another, like in a marriage or a deep friendship, that there are disagreements that come, but for the sake of the unity, for the sake of the larger value of the relationship, that we maintain unity and bear with one another even when it's difficult. So that's the second thing. And the third value is humility. I think humility is a distinctly Christian virtue. St. Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 13 that he's talking about contrasting our knowledge of God in this life and our knowledge of what we'll know of God in the next. And he says, now I see in a mirror dimly or through a glass darkly, but then face to face. So he's saying we see now and it's murky, but then we will see clearly. Now I know in part, but then in the life to come, I shall know fully, even as I have been fully known. So he's saying that God knows everything now. We don't, but we will know fully someday. And I think beyond our knowledge of God, that extends to all realms of human existence, that we only know in part. We are finite creatures, and there's only so much we can know. We've seen that as science and scientists and politicians, they've made decisions. They've collected data and made public health decisions, and they're doing that based on the limited knowledge, and it changes. And I don't think that's evidence of a vast conspiracy. I don't think that's a problem. It's just the nature of human knowledge. We only know in part, and knowledge changes over time, and it requires that we make different decisions. As your consistory, we are acting in humility on the best information we have. We know that we're going to make some wrong decisions. We're going to make some decisions that in hindsight will look foolish or could look foolish. We're entering into this with humility, holding it loosely, and we ask that you do the same, that you bear with us in humility. And we invite you to humbly check your own knowledge as it relates to our life together. And so that's the last thing we're inviting you into, is humility. The document goes on, it clearly outlines what is expected of you and required of you. Just a few main highlights. We ask that if you, prior to June 21st, if you have an elevated temperature or a fever within 72 hours of June 21st, that you do not come to worship. And we also ask that if you've had a cough or other symptoms of COVID-19, or if you have been in contact with anyone who's been positively diagnosed with COVID-19 14 days prior to June 21st, that you stay home. And that's going to be true for any Sunday. You'll be screened at the door with those questions. We will also check you in. Again, the only purpose of checking you in is for contact tracing. If someone were to come down with COVID-19, we want to be able to contact everyone who is here on that Sunday. We're going to ask that you wear a mask, again, not for yourself, but for the sake of someone else. We are going to practice social distancing. You can sit with your friend or family unit that you live with. If you live alone, but there's one friend you always come to church with, or one family that you're close with, if you approach that friend or family and ask to sit with them and they agree, knowing the risks involved, we want to allow that. We know that church can already be a really lonely experience for some of you, and we want you to not feel, to bear an extra burden in this. So you will sit with that family or that friend. Once you enter into that agreement, every week you come, it will be the same person. But we do want to make space for that. The worship service is going to be shorter. Offering plates will be at the door. We won't be passing those. We're going to reduce the amount of singing. Singing is one of the more risky one of the more risky events that we do, because we project our voices. So we're going to reduce the amount of singing and also ask that you sing quietly with inside voices. And there are going to be some other differences as well. Again, we're going to practice social distancing. Bulletins will be on your seats when you come in. There's not going to be a coffee hour, again, just to reduce the amount of time that we have to spread germs with one another. We will clean the space in between each week. And again, if you come down with COVID-19 in between services, we ask that you contact us immediately so we can begin to tell people. The rest of the guidelines are in this letter that we are distributing to you. There's frequently asked questions with links that you can check out for more reading. If you have any questions after you read this, please don't hesitate to contact us. And we are so excited to see you again and to worship together again very soon. The Lord be with you all.